Okay, good morning, everyone. And it's really nice to see you all here. Back to our wonderful, class of the mouth is mightier than the sword. And we are up to day 76. Day 76, page 224. Unfortunately, if anybody needs a new book, I think everybody on here has one. I just got a message from someone. I don't remember who it was. I have to look up the email again. We are out of books, but thank God it's easy to find it online, right? And I will be able to direct you that way if someone needs a new book. Okay, we are up to a very interesting discussion. And the discussion over here is not so much interesting as the question, right? That we mentioned in previous times, that the question sometimes is sort of just to bring out an idea, right? But the question over here is very similar to last one, right? The last one, it's really, the answer is basically the same, but more in the situation over here allows us to bring out a crucial point, not necessarily so much in the halakha aspect, but in the awareness aspect of it. And let's get cracking. So the dilemma is, right, your spouse works for a world's most mismanaged office, right? And her boss is constantly throwing emergencies on her desk, right? She's constantly staying late, right? And she comes home frustrated and all the beautiful things that happen in a mismanaged office, right? And over here, the question is, right? Are you allowed to listen to her? I'm tired against her boss, right? Try to talk about the frustration and how her boss is always, doing things last minute and making her stay late or whatever it is. And wherever the office is, right? If it's a thing like that, or if it's, the mistreatment or the mismanagement or whatever it is, right? Are you allowed to listen to her? So the answer is obvious, yes, just like we spoke about the day beforehand. And that's what I mean to say. The discussion, the question itself is, we already know the answer, right? Day 75, yesterday's halakha, right? We had a similar discussion, right? Where someone needs to express themselves. Someone needs to, talk about the frustration that they're having. So over there was, your sister or a close friend, and we said that sharing someone's burden is a powerful act of chesed, right? And it's important to reflect on that, and to think about that. As we mentioned, right? And I had a discussion with someone during the week about it. Also, it is you have to make sure that you toe the line, right? And we said sometimes it's if it's too much, it's not chesed. If you encourage. And it's not a simple thing, but the concept of listening to someone is an act of chesed. How much more so, right? If it's your spouse, right? So the halakha is straightforward. The point I think that they're trying to bring out over here, or at least what I took out from over here, is that the dilemma of your spouse, and the dilemma of your spouse, if you look at however, right, the third line down, right, from where the halakha is. However, there are two dangers, and I think this is why it's bringing it down. There are two dangers. These kinds of conversations can become so frequent that your home's atmosphere will be overtaken by negativity, right? Or you will be drawn into a negativity and offer your own lashon hara, right? So those are the two dangers. The two dangers are, and I think that's what it's bringing out with a spouse, right? With a friend on the phone or a sister, whatever, it's not something constant, right? It's not something it could turn into, just like anything, but not necessarily. They're just letting out some frustration. You see them, whatever, they talk on the phone, right? But your spouse, hopefully you have a good relationship and you talk to each other, right? At least somewhat, right? And so with your spouse, a lot of times it could become very dangerous because the conversation is too much, right? You start throwing in your own things that are not necessary. You start saying your own thing. Yeah, I can't believe you bought that. If you're trying to be encouraging, or it's just constant having all the time, and the house becomes a house where negativity is constantly being spoken, right? And that, my friends, is the depth behind a very troubling, scary, right, passage in the Talmud. Passage in the Talmud says that the conversation between a husband and wife could lead them both to Gehenna, could lead them both to hell, right? Could lead them both to hell. And the commentaries explain that that's referring to when they speak lashon hara. So the commentaries say, but you're allowed to let your frustration. You're allowed to. The answer is because of these two dangers. Because a husband and wife, right? Again, most of the conversation, they want to encourage the other one. They want to talk about, help. And you go too far. You talk too much, right? About negativity, about the other person. You care so much about them. So you add on, you start saying things, right? And when you're talking to your husband and wife, most people, you can't put the phone on mute and then go do your thing because you're talking in person, right? Most times, right? They're supposed to be part of the conversation, right? So it is the danger of lashon hara, right? Is so strong. You have to be careful how it's done, right? Now, that's what we said. It's not, you're allowed to do it. And sometimes you have to do it. You have to be open. You have to talk. You have to let out your frustrations, right? That's the healthy avenue. From the most healthy avenue should be your spouse, not a friend, right? It's good to have a friend, but if you're able to have that conversation with your spouse, 100%. But the danger is a real danger, right? The danger of it spreading, the danger of creating that atmosphere in the house of a negative atmosphere. When was the last time you guys spoke about something positive, right? You both have hard working jobs. You both have things that are your bosses or the people you work with or whatever industry you're in, right? There's always hardships. There's always difficulties. And if it's always, right, so how's your day? Today's day, oh my gosh. And then you go, and then should have seen what happened by me, right? And then you talk, it's this world, and then you start talking about this world, and you talk about everybody and these people in that category and this and that, and it was nothing to do anymore with letting out your frustration about your job or whatever it is. It's because you're constantly talking about it, and not only are you creating a negative atmosphere in the house, which is toxic, right? But you're also talking now lashon hara that's not doesn't fall under the category of helping out to relieve that stress or whatever it is. You're going too far, and that's what the Talmud means to say that conversation could lead to them going to Gehenna, right? Because of that danger. So much more. We have to be careful, like we spoke about in last week's class, right? Of you have to make sure that you keep that conversation at bay to a certain degree, right? You have to make sure that. And as they say, the caveat, you're not allowed to believe the information 100%, right? It's true. You're not saying that your spouse is a liar, right? But regarding the concept of believing all the information, right? You're not allowed to believe in it, right? You're allowed to act upon it if it would play out, just like any other scenario. But you also have to be very careful, right? And it's a two-way street. Number one, the one that's listening and the one that's speaking. Right? You have to, when you want to go ahead and you want to say something that happened in your day, you should, of course, speak and have that conversation with your spouse. But at the same time, use your seichel, right? Use your brain. Think about how you're going to present it, right? Think about what information really needs to be said and doesn't need to be said, right? Think about, hopefully you know your spouse and you know what ticks him, her off, right? And that that if you're going to mention something that happened because they care about you, right? That certain things, that might have happened or might whatever, is going to send them off the rail because your spouse. So you have to think, right? You have to think. Yes, it's important to have an open relationship, but an open relationship doesn't mean to say that you have to tell them every time you're going to use the bathroom, right? You don't have to say that, right? So therefore, not everything do you have to say, right? Not everything do you have to say because of that danger, right? One of creating a toxic atmosphere, letting that it's going to spiral. And I want to add one more caveat. You know your spouse and you know that this thing is really going to tick them off, right? It's going to send them down. So now if you really need to talk about it, do it in a healthy way, do it over dinner, do it if the kids are around, I don't know, ways of that, of course, if it's kids around, then you have to be careful because then they're going to hear you, unless they're little kids, whatever. You have to go out to eat, and then do it in a restaurant, right? So, most people stay civil in a restaurant, right? Most people, right? So it's, use your seichel, use your thoughts. If you really need to get something off your chest, but you know that that's really going to bother them, right? Use your seichel of how to do that. So that, I think, is the caveat that they're adding, because again, the actual halacha is exactly the same, right? It's just a spouse, right? And on the contrary, with a spouse, you have even more. It's more to be able to listen to and to talk to, right? But over here, the caveat is, I think what they're adding in is these dangers. Any questions or comments on this?
I could add one thing I did some years ago when I was working in a very high pressure job. I found myself coming home irritable, and I said, you know what, wait a minute. So I would walk in the door and I'd say, watch out, world, I've had a rough day, give me some time and space. And I would just go decompress, and then everything was good. So that was just one solution that avoided ongoing frustration, I guess, or prevented it.
That's a beautiful suggestion. Thank you for suggesting that. If one has the luxury to do that, great. If you're able to do that even before you come home, that's great. If you can't do it before you come home, or when you come home, not always are you able to do that, because you come home and you bring the kids home and whatever. It all depends on your situation. But the concept, right? Even if you're not able to do that, the concept, at least in your head, or in your, carving out that place in your head, say, okay, right now I'll get frustrated later, right? Or get frustrated earlier. That concept is a beautiful concept. But again, if you're able to do that, that's great. And thank you for sharing that.
Okay.
Questions or comments? Go ahead, Bonnie, you were first.
Somewhat along the lines, there's something we refer to as pillow talk. If someone is married in a relationship, I think some people assume that it's okay to tell your spouse because he or she is your other half. And of course, that's not the case. And then some people who are telling you something, toelis, lashon hara, along those lines, may assume you're telling your spouse also because you're supposed to be one. So you got to be real careful about that. And I personally, if somebody's telling me something, I don't assume anything I'm saying. Is this something I can tell Kevin, or should I strictly keep it to myself? Obviously I'm not going to tell anybody else, but again, pillow talk is a word I refer to. I don't know if it's a known word, but thinking you're always going to share something with your spouse, you're automatically going to, you automatically should, and that's not the case at all. You got to treat it, he as just another person else, or she as another person outside of you, and ask permission. Is it okay?
Bonnie, that is a great point. And the concept of pillow talk actually is not a new thing. The actual statement of the Talmud, right, is that it doesn't say just a conversation between a husband and wife. It says a conversation a husband and wife have, right, during nighttime. When they're sort of, intimate with each other, or cuddling with each other, or things like that. So that is a time, and that's what's called pillow talk. So this idea is an old idea, and it is a time for a husband and wife to connect, and it is a great opportunity to, sort of have those, conversations. But yes, you have to be very careful what you say. Not everything you could say. If one's a therapist, right, not everything their patients tells them they're not allowed to say it. It's illegal, right? Besides law, it's morally incorrect, right? So sometimes you have to look at yourself as someone's telling you something, or you saw something, as sort of being a therapist, being a rabbi, being a lawyer. There's confidentiality. Whatever your position, there's things that you're not allowed to tell your spouse, and your spouse understands that, right? There's certain things that just you can't. There's confidentiality. People rely on you to keep things confidential, and therefore there's certain. The same thing, not therefore, the same thing, right? There's certain things that you hear that you have to look at it as it's confidential. I can't say something because the Torah tells me I'm not allowed to say something, right? What's better? Why is it that if it's the law telling me that, okay, I understand that he's a lawyer, he's a doctor, he's a rabbi, he's whatever, right? So it's something called confidentiality, right? There's certain things that the Torah is telling you that you're not allowed to say, right? And just because, but it's my spouse and I want to have an open relationship with my spouse. You could, but we understand that when the secular government or it seems morally correct because it's confidential, people are entrusting you with information. So too, the Torah tells you that certain things you're not allowed to say, right? And certain things, there's ways you're allowed to say it, how much you're allowed to say it, what's the reason why you're saying it, right? And therefore, right, it's the same idea. You're not allowed to say certain things and you have to be more careful, right? As you coined it, pillow talk, because during those conversations, you are to become more loose with your tongue, right? And you don't, and you have to be, I know doctors and lawyers also have to be more careful. They want to share an interesting story that they had or an interesting case. And, you have to be careful, right? There's ways of saying it. I had this interesting case once, and it could be happened today. It could be happened a couple of weeks ago. You don't say the name. That your spouse doesn't know your clients, right? And there's ways of, saying this story to have that conversation and to share your day, but without revealing the information, staying within the lines. So too, right? Within Torah, there's a similar idea. But thank you for bringing that up. Great point. Suzette, you wanted to say something.
I think the discussion as it continued answered my question, so I can hold it. I can hold it for now. Thank you.
Cool. Of course. Anybody else? Okay.
Yeah, I say one
Go
thing.
ahead, Emily.
No, I was saying you can also say to your spouse, like, let's say they're the one who has the job that's challenging and they're the one who's complaining a lot or whatever it is. You can also say, like, look, and probably they know, like, I'm working on, I go to this Lashon Hara class with Rabbi Feigenbaum, and I'm working on this, and I feel like it's creating a lot of negativity. And can we maybe can we maybe talk about it in a constructive way? Because I think sometimes people just like, they don't just like say the obvious, why not come out and say, look, I know you're having such a hard time at work. I'm so sorry. I feel like these conversations are creating a lot of negativity in the house, or I'm getting a really bad, this is giving me a really bad opinion of your boss or whatever it is. I'm really working on the way I speak. That, like, can we, what I'm saying? If it's your spouse, you could address that. You can be honest and just say that, why not come forward and say that? Why do you have to like beat around the bush,
No, you're 100% correct. And any tools that you could use, and it's a great point. Any tools that you could use to, make it that you're not harming your relationship in any time, if it's this or if it's a spouse notices something that their spouse isn't doing, their husband or their wife is doing or not doing, or they want to move forward on something. If it's Lashon Hara, if it's taking on something as a family, eating a little more kosher, lighting Friday night candles, going to synagogue more, whatever it is, right? Generally, we see the flaws in our spouses. We don't see the flaws in ourselves, right? So it's always easier to not criticize, God forbid, but to give a positive, constructive criticism, right, to our spouses, right? So one has to reflect on that. And yes, there's ways of doing it in a healthy way. But as your point regarding Lashon Hara, right, that's always a tricky one, especially if they're the ones that are coming to you, right? So you want to be a listening ear, but at the same time, you also have to be careful. And that is a great way, I'm learning Lashon Hara now, that, and let's just be mindful of that, when we talk, in a respectful way, in a loving way. Excellent point. Anybody else? Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, I have two things. One that the situation was where my spouse was working for my father. And that became a very, very awkward kind of thing. The other is, if like what Emily was saying, if you kind of trying to stop the conversation and talking that it's Lashon Hara, almost 50 years we're married now. I don't know that would really help. Just,
right. So no, I don't think Emily
changing the subject, I think.
Right. So I don't think Emily's, Emily, if you don't mind, I think I'm going to respond to that. I don't think Emily's saying, the way I understood is to interrupt the conversation, but just to have a conversation another time, that with mentioning that you're learning Lashon Hara and mentioning that, we know we have to be a little more careful about, when we talk, and it's important to have conversation, but at a different time, mention these things. And this is in general. It's the Talmud tells us, do not rebuke someone during his anger. Right? Do not rebuke someone do not engage someone in conversation during their anger, right? And it's not only during their anger, it's during anything. Unless there's immediate danger, unless, but most of the time it's not the best time to, discipline someone or rebuke someone during they're doing the thing, right? It's afterwards, or before, to try to make aware of those things. Okay, go ahead, Suzette.
So I have a question to that.
And then, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I have a question to that last point about not rebuking someone in their anger. So in a situation that I had recently with a family member, I was speaking with one of my children, and I stopped the conversation because I just didn't feel it was a time and the place. And I said, we'll continue this when I get home. Well, when we got home, there was no desire on my child's part to continue the conversation. So I really don't know what the issue was at heart. But I guess in working through this, if the conversation had continued, then very likely, everything would have been spilled. Lashon Hara, you name it, everything would have come out. So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, okay, Lashon Hara there was stopped, but I still don't have any information. So I don't know if there's, some underlying struggles. So I'm not sure how to go back and broach that. So the rebuke happened. Right. The conversation was stopped. No Lashon Hara, but I don't have any more information.
Right. So those are always tricky situations, and these things do happen. This does happen sometimes when you don't do, take care of it right then, or you sort of switch it over to another time. That sort of the as we call it, the heat of the moment, right? That opportunity is lost, and then sort of now you're trying to figure out how to best go back to it. So there's no magic answer, but what I find, and I try to do this with my kids sometimes, and I'm not the best either, right? Is to find a time when there's really nothing, a Shabbos afternoon, or in the evening one night, something that whatever it is, and say, hey, listen, I just want to chat. Start the conversation like that. I just want to chat. I know it's been a week or whatever it is, a couple of days, but I just want to get back to what I had time to reflect, and I really wanted to sit on it and think about it. I want to make sure that we're talking about this in the most healthiest manner, intellectual, emotional, right? Use your words, right? But I want to go back to that conversation. Because I think it's important to start that up, and we're both level-headed right now. We're both just calm, and we're just having a conversation. There's no right or wrong right now. We're just having a conversation, and then bring it up that way. Right? You have to create the situation, but you are now in control of it. You're both calm. You're both collected. Nothing's going on, right? You could do it over ice cream somewhere or in the bedroom, whatever it is, right? And then you go ahead and say, I want to go back to what where we left off, right? And go back to that situation. And I say, whatever, it's over, it's past. You're right, it's over, it's past, but. I do want to. I want to bring. I think it's something important to, go over and to get to the depth of what's going on over here. Something like that. Every situation, of course, is different. It depends who you're dealing with. If it's a child, if it's a spouse, if it's a parent, if it's a coworker, right? Every situation is different. How to do that. But you definitely have to come back, and I've done it. I've done it. Gone, sat down and say, hey, listen, said, it's over, whatever. I said, yeah, I know, but I want to talk about this. I want to how to make sure this doesn't happen again. I want to get more information about what happened exactly. Let's try to rehash this out. So yeah, it's important to create that. You have to create that. You have to be proactive. And you could be, and I'm not saying you, but we could be lazy and just say whatever, it's done with, the moment's over and move on, right? But then who's gaining? No one, right? The kid's not gaining, you're not gaining, right? The person that you're trying to help out and discipline is not gaining, right? They might feel like it because they dodged one, right? That's how kids think sometimes. Oh, I dodged this one, right? I'm not going to get punished or whatever it is. The conversation's over. I don't have to have a whole long conversation with, with my parent about this, right? But really, they're losing out. So you are, as the responsible one, have to create that opportunity, but make sure it's a healthy opportunity. Okay, let's move on. We're always at the end of class. We're always open for questions and answers. And if you want to continue this conversation, but I want to point out something very powerful, and it's something obvious, right? But I think something that we have to think about. If you look at the grow your good eye, right? Clean the window, right? The next page, and I'm not gonna go through the whole 2-3 paragraphs. I want to go through the last paragraph, right? Where a root cause of lashon hara, right? We're always, what's the root cause? What is one of the root cause of lashon hara, right? Says the Chafetz Chaim, right? Is scoffing, right? Like a person who peers out of a dirty window and sees a dirty world, right? The whole reality is different, right? I was sitting on the couch the other day with one of my daughters, right? And she looks at my glasses. Daddy, your glasses are so dirty, right? So I don't know. I don't think I clean my glasses every once in a while, but I don't know. I just look at it as like, I think when I clean my glasses too much, right? Like now I'm doing it because I just mentioned it, right? But I think when I like clean the world looks too bright. No, I'm just kidding. But I don't know. I'm just used to it. Right? But when you have like dirty glasses or dirty windows, everything looks dirty, right? Everything that's if you clean the windows, and all of a sudden, wow, everything's clean. And it says the Chafetz Chaim, it's the same thing, right? A person who, and the example they're giving of, you have one family member that's always saying negative things in a joking way, right? Oh, Uncle Yankel, always speaks well, but his English is a little funny, right? He still has a little European English to it, right? He doesn't mean to be negative, right? But he's always finding that negative point, right? And in the beginning, once or twice, it could be like a little funny, a little joke. Right, but if it's something that you're constantly doing, right, so then there's something wrong with because you're always noticing that negative component, right? There's something wrong with your glasses. You're always noticing the negative, right? And that's one of the roots of lashon hara. Because in the beginning, it could just be a little fun here and a little fun there, nothing really dangerous, nothing really bad. But what you're doing is you're training yourself to always see the negative. Right. And I was talking to someone once and said, well, it's not harmful. I'm just, it's a sarcastic jokes and things like that. I said, yeah, once in a while, it's not the end of the world, but you are training yourself, right, to always be in a negative situation. You're always talking negative, and eventually it gets to it. It's not funny anymore. It's enough, right? It's not funny anymore. That person, it constantly, it's just enough because it's not funny anymore. It changes the person, right? It changes who the person is. And that's one of the roots of lashon hara, right? Is that one of the roots that causes someone to become a baal lashon hara is always seeing negative things, even if you're doing it as a joke, or you have to be able to see the greater picture. Yes, there is negative things out there, but you have to be able to see the positive, right? And then see the negative as an opportunity to change that, but not focus, right, and constantly on the negative. And so it's really making sure that you're not a person that's always noticing the negative, and then being more of a person that's noticing the positive. Sometimes and again, I'm not saying it's a general thing, but a lot of times you find, there's certain people that are always finding, and yes, you have to have people to proofread your stuff, and you have to put it through different spell check and Grammarly and things like that, and people do that, but there's always mistakes happen. Even the Wall Street Journal has a section every day, of corrections. Mistakes happen, right? But you always have this. It's interesting, being in public service now for 10 years, right? In Kansas and here, right? It's interesting to see that there's, yeah, every once in a while you get some, oh, like a big mistake, call you up, and they're doing it out of, just trying to help you out. Then you have certain people that always find the mistake, right? But make a deal out of it and make a whole thing. And it's in a negative way. They're always finding, and their eye is always noticing, right? And it's not only in the bulletin, it's not only in the thing, it's also in short things or how things are. For some reason, they're the ones that always see the negative, right? And then you see eventually it starts becoming a thing, and they gather with other people and they talk about it and they laugh about it and this, and it could be it's joke and it's funny or whatever it is, but it creates a personality. It starts defining you as someone that's always noticing the negative, right? And that's not healthy. That's not, because then you also become negative. Of course, there's people, you have to, if there's a mistake, correct it. Right. And if it's a small type or whatever it is, just leave it alone sometimes. It's not changing the whole thing. And, it happens. These mistakes, it happens. Right. If it's a big thing, yes, of course. I've people have messages. Oh, you have the wrong date on. Thank you for telling me. Right. I have a mistake. For Monday Night Ministries, I'm using the same flyers. I'm just changing the information, and I left the old date on. Thank you. Right. Of course, that's something that has to be said. Right. But sometimes a little. It's a lot of times, painted in I want to try to help or whatever it is, right? Over here, it's their example is, being that the people, the joker in the family, right? But if it's something that constantly happens, then you have to look into yourself and say, am I just always finding the negative in things? Do I see the positive? Do I see all the good? And the last week's Torah portion, see how far this goes. Last week's Torah portion, there's a famous question that everybody asks, right? So when God told Moshe Rabbeinu about the 10th plague, right, Makas Bechoros, what did God tell Moshe? Right? God told Moshe Bechatzos Halayla, at midnight. At midnight, it's going to happen. When Moshe went and told Paro, what did he say? He says Kechatzos Halayla, right? Around midnight. Right? So the commentaries ask, hello, Moshe, right? What are you doing, right? God said at midnight, so say at midnight. Why are you changing the words, right? You're gonna say it's one letter. Yeah, that one letter makes a big difference. It's at midnight or around midnight, right? So why are you changing it? So Rashi on the spot, right, notices the question, and he brings down the midrash that tells us that Moshe Rabbeinu was scared that the Khartume Mitzrayim, the magicians, the wise men of Mitzrayim would look at the time through the astrology or however way they told time, with the stars, however way they told time. And they would say, oh, look, it's a minute before midnight. Forget it. He was wrong. Oh, it's a minute after midnight. Forget it. Right? So therefore, Moshe said around midnight because he didn't want to make God seem like a liar, right? And to ruin the whole inspiration. So Rav Moshe Feinstein asks, Rav Dessler asks, everybody asks, really? Come on. We're at the 10th plague, right? The plague happened. All of everyone died, right? Oh, but it was a minute before, it was a minute afterwards. Let's say 5 minutes before, 5 minutes afterwards. That's what Moshe was scared about? Says all the commentaries, because human nature is that we focus on the negative. And even though it's a small little negative, right? It's a minute, 5 minutes. Look at all the inspiration. We're going to focus on that. They're going to drill that and all the inspiration. It's not necessarily for the Egyptians, but for the Jewish people, because the Exodus in Egypt is a foundation of our belief in God, right? A foundation of our nationhood, and that God controls nature and God controls everything. And that would be the talking point. That's going to be the talking. The talking point is going to be the 5 minute off that God was. The talking point is that the bulletin had a comma in the wrong place. Right? The talking point is that the rabbi in his sermon, said the wrong word by mistake. He used the word wrong. He used the English language wrong. Can't believe it. What kind of speaker? His sermon was great. The message was awesome. Right? But he used the wrong word. The talking point is about a certain politician, whatever, he's doing great. Talking point is about, a certain organization that's a talking point. Spouse, friends. That is human nature. We focus and we harp and we talking point about that thing, even though the inspiration, 10 plagues, the plague happened. Moshe Rabbeinu knew human nature. Moshe Rabbeinu is teaching us, right, that we can't give, as we have to be so much more careful. But then at the flip side is other people that are hearing the conversation, people that are hearing things, we also have to be aware not to fall prey to that. And that's what he's talking about. Are our glasses dirty? Do we notice the negative? Are we harping on the negative? Right? Then we're going to start speaking Lashon Hara. Then we're going to be negative people. Then we're going to have always a negative view on things. And I think that ties very nicely into the Zohar, the quote of the day. And we'll finish with this. The prayer of one who speaks Lashon Hara do not appear before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, before God. For a spirit of tumah clings to them until he returns and does tshuva. Why Lashon Hara more than anything else? And I think based off what we're saying, because a person that speaks Lashon Hara, right, within them, right, they are someone that sees things in a negative way, right? Again, there's Toelis in this case. That's not a negative person. If you're following the rules, there's certain things you're allowed to say, as we mentioned. But if you're the one that's the gossiper, you're the one that's always talking, you're the one that sees the negative, you're the one that's always harping on the negative, then there's tumah around you. Your glasses are dirty, right? It's not just that act of Lashon Hara, it's really the essence of who you are. So your prayers have this negative around it. Of course, we all could always do tshuva, could always repent, we could always return, right? But that's the thing, and I think that's an important lesson that we have to reflect on, right? And to think about constantly, right? What kind of people do we want to be? Do we want to be that person that is always finding the negative in things? Or we want to be that person that's always harping on it and sharing, and then we lose all the inspiration, we lose all the good. I'm on this group of rabbis, WhatsApp group, and every once in a while, different rabbis point out different things that their synagogue does and different ideas, and it's good to see that it's and then a lot of times they say, like, sometimes we feel like our congregants don't appreciate what we do, right? They always say, oh, well, we saw in that synagogue what they're doing, or that organization what they're doing, and there's, of course, you have to have committees and always make better, and there's healthy ways of doing it. But what's our mindset? Do we notice what we have? Are we always noticing what we don't have? We're always noticing the negative, right? And that's the root of Lashon Hara. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Just a quick reminder, there is a lunch to learn this Thursday, right, tomorrow, right, in the JCA. Thank you to Jim Richmond, who's in the house, right, for sponsoring in honor of Dina, right, his wife. So please join us for that. It will be on Zoom, but as the lunch learns now on Zoom, it's not interactive. It's just on the side. You're able to hear it because thank God we're getting a crowd in person. So please join us. There'll be yummy food. Not sure what it is yet, but I'm sure the food is yummy. Right, and please join us tomorrow, and that will be on Tu B'Shvat. We're going to talk about the connection of man to tree and all those beautiful lessons to be had and to grow from. On that note,